Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Paul Danieri. I'm the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and I'm very happy to welcome you to tonight's installment of the Caleb and Michelle Grimes lecture series. I'm just going to begin by giving a brief overview of the lecture series. The series is funded by Caleb and Michelle Grimes, and the purpose of it is to bring together the range of disciplines that we study in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, everything from the hard sciences through the social sciences to the humanities, and to bring them together to focus on a particular issue of broad public concern. And the idea in doing so is to really stress what is the core mission of a College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is to bring those range of areas of studies to bear on problems that face society. A liberal education is an education that's meant not merely to prepare somebody for work, but to inform society and to inform people to be citizens in a democratic society. And the lecture series is meant to embody that. So this year's series, as you well know since you're here, is about Haiti. And it's a great example of something that brings an entire huge range of disciplines that we cover, not only across the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, but across everything we do here at the University of Florida to bear on a problem of considerable import. So that's what the series is about. Last year, just in case you're curious, it took a very different tack. It was about technologies of identity, things like DNA identification, surveillance, and how and the kinds of policy and cultural problems that creates. We were just talking a little while ago, a few of us, about what we'll do next year, and we have no idea, but we're open to suggestions. So without any further ado, I want to introduce the person who will introduce tonight's speaker, but really who's been instrumental in actually getting this off the ground and doing the hard work of organizing and has done a really wonderful job of it, Bonnie Efros. So please join me in thanking her.
Hi, good evening everybody, and thank you for coming out despite the rain. We very much appreciate it after the hard work that goes into putting together a series like this. As many of you know already, the choice of this year's theme, Haiti's Challenges, Rebuilding Lives and Nation in the Earthquake's Aftermath, was of course inspired by the terrible disaster that struck Haiti just a year ago. We tried to select speakers who would be able to address the issues of Haiti from many different perspectives, and many that went far beyond the single event of the earthquake. Many of the challenges that are faced by Haitians today are very, very long-term. Those of you who were at Professor Gagis's talk 2 weeks ago saw how many of the systemic problems that exist in Haiti today can be traced back over 2 centuries. So the daunting battle faced by Haitians in restoring and rebuilding their country is the result of a complex web of factors, some with ancient roots and some much more recent. Although there is much to despair of, there's also hope, whether inspired in Haiti by Haitians, such as the humanitarian work done by Jean Dubon, which was highlighted in the film Bound by Haiti, which was shown here on campus in January, or those who come in from the outside, like Professor Murray, or like Partners in Health, known as Zanmi Lizanti in Haitian Creole. Indeed, we've seen here in Gainesville an enormous outpouring of interest in helping the people of Haiti. Whether part of the University of Florida or in the broader community, many local residents here have asked what they can do to help out the situation on the ground in Haiti. And it was with this objective in mind that we invited Professor Murray, a nearly 40-year veteran of engagement with Haiti, to speak of some of the long-term infrastructural challenges that face Haiti in its rebuilding effort. And this evening, he's going to present some of the strategies that might help Haitians, as well as those wishing to help Haiti, determine how best they might lend their efforts to improve the current situation. But before introducing Professor Murray formally, I would like to take a few moments to acknowledge the hard work of Sophia Akerd, Chris Benora, and Cindy Link in the Class Dean's office for helping to prepare for this lecture and the upcoming lecture and panel discussion that will be held on the 1st and 17th of March, respectively. And we have information in the back about these events if you'd like to find out more about them. And we also have a sign-up list for the Center for the Humanities and the Public Sphere if you'd like to get onto our email list. And I'd like to point out, too, before I forget, that this evening's lecture is going to follow a slightly different format than we've done for past events. After Professor Murray's talk, there's going to be a 5-minute break, which will be followed by a question and answer session for those of you who'd like to stay and hear some more. In the past weeks, when we held a panel of UF faculty who were working on projects in Haiti, and at student events, including the showing of the film Bound by Haiti, made by 2 UF alumni, we have repeatedly heard audience members asking how they might best help in Haiti, and whether, in fact, that foreign aid or any kind of contributions are actually reaching Haitians themselves. Well, most people have shied away from answering these thorny questions because they feel that it's not their area. The name I heard raised most frequently as the person who could answer these questions was University of Florida's own faculty member, Gerald Murray, who's a professor emeritus in the Department of Anthropology. And it's thus with great pleasure that I introduce him to you today. Although it appears that many of you need no introduction to Professor Gerald Murray, I want to point to some of the highlights of his career. In 1977, Professor Murray completed his PhD in anthropology at Columbia University. He taught for 10 years at UMass Boston, and then in 1985 moved to the University of Florida, where he has remained ever since, despite his retirement last year. His research, published in 3 books and numerous articles, has been sponsored by a variety of agencies, including, among others, USAID, the Inter-American Foundation, the Peace Corps, the OAS, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, UNESCO, the Smithsonian, and the Office of Technical Assessment of the U.S. Congress. However, this bare outline does little to demonstrate Professor Murray's passion and commitment to his chosen field of applied anthropology and the people he has met through the course of his research. Besides working in Haiti since 1972, Professor Murray has done field research also in the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, Panama, Peru, Burundi, Cameroon, Ghana, Madagascar, Israel, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the United States. He's conducted interviews with his subjects in Spanish, French, Haitian Creole, Modern Hebrew, German, and Italian. In the Caribbean, in particular, his work has focused on a number of interests, including deforestation, folk medical systems, educational reform, and project design and evaluation. What ties these disparate issues together has been his underlying belief that negative systemic factors in the countries in which he has worked can often be, and here I quote him, neutralized or at least mitigated with intelligent analysis and planning. I thus hope you'll you'll join me in welcoming Professor Gerald Murray this evening for his lecture, The Anthropology of Survival in Post-Earthquake Haiti, Institutional Predators, Individual Maneuver.
Bonnie, thank you very much. That was a beautiful introduction. I want you to write my obituary, okay? I'm going to try to do a number of things tonight. I'm going to try to keep my talk to 45 minutes. And let me discipline myself to do that, and then take a brief break, and then field as many questions as possible. I'm going to be attacking a number of sacred cows tonight, but hopefully, basically what I want to do in the talk is switch to an anthropological mode. Professor Gegas last time gave an excellent historical overview, a diachronic overview of Haiti. I want to deal with Haiti now synchronically, that is, at the present time, looking at the systems that now exist. An anthropological approach to human life breaks human life down into different domains: economics, family life, healthcare, religion. I'm going to deal with those domains, and I'm going to focus not on Port-au-Prince, which has so much attention given it by the international community, but on the village where Maria, my wife, and I lived. I'm not going to generalize to all of Haiti from that village, but I'm going to try to look at the problems of Haitian villages and try to find windows of opportunity where development can work in each of these domains. And I'll give examples of cases that I believe have worked. I'll also be dealing with institutional dilemmas. Much development does not have the impact, much development funding does not have the impact that it's theoretically supposed to have. And I'm going to discuss the institutional barriers. The institutional barriers are not only on the part of the Haitian authorities, the Haitian government, but also on the part of foreign implementing agencies, both donor agencies and NGOs. But I'm going to end on an upbeat note. My final part will be the U.S. has committed $1 billion to Haiti, so I'll say if I had $1 billion, what would I do with it in Haiti? Okay, I think there are very specific ways of spending that $1 billion that would have significant impact. There are more numerous ways of wasting the money. So I hope to end then on a positive and practical impact. I'm dealing here, some people that have come tonight have more Haiti experience than I have, so I'm nervous lecturing to them about Haiti, but I'll do the best I can, okay? Just to place Haiti quickly in geographical perspective. It's part of the Greater Antilles, of course. It's with Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, it constitutes, and Jamaica constitutes the Greater Antilles. Haiti, unlike most islands in the Caribbean, is divided into two. I won't go into the historical reasons for that. Professor Gegas dealt with some of those last week, or in his lecture. But it is divided into two. However, the island is not equally distributed, neither physically nor demographically. As you can see from this relief map, the eastern two-thirds, the Dominican Republic, the eastern two-thirds have much more flatter land that is suitable for agriculture. There are mountains in the Dominican Republic, but a heavy percentage of the land is flat. Haiti, on the western two-thirds, you can see, is more mountainous. Here's another relief map, and you can see how Haiti is, the mountains of Haiti are not appropriate for intensive agriculture. The population of Haiti and the Dominican Republic are about the same. So we're going, so basically Haiti has had problems of soil erosion and other problems due to partially to the physical nature of the part of the island in which it's located. Let me just deal with human life as a series of strategies that deal with different domains. I want to talk quickly about agricultural strategies, largely by males in Haiti. Women do participate in agriculture, but agriculture is largely the domain of males. Marketing is the domain of females. That's the economic dimension of life in rural Haiti. Reproductive strategies, family life, how Haitians in the rural areas prepare for protection in old age through their children. Health strategies, that's part of any human culture has health issues and health strategies. Schooling strategies, educational strategies. Human beings raise their children, educate their children. Now formal education is very important in Haiti. Child relocation. Part of Haitian survival strategies in the rural areas is relocating children to live with other families. Sometimes your relatives, but sometimes not your relatives. I don't know if you've heard the term reste avec. I want to talk a little bit about that. It's a phenomenon that's sometimes misunderstood. And finally, the major survival strategy in Haiti now, emigration. Probably, given the current circumstances in Haiti, for most Haitians, the most fortunate thing they could do for their children is to help the children to emigrate. Not necessarily forever, but to get out. Now let's quickly, let me talk about the farming system. I'm going to do this very briefly. A farming system has several components. I'm particularly interested in the land tenure system. How do people get access to land, crops, livestock, and the market system? Okay, Haitian peasant land tenure in a nutshell. Unlike many Latin American countries where the land is concentrated in a few hands, the land of Haiti is spread out. There are large land holdings in Haiti, but they constitute a small minority. Unlike Latin Americans, Haitians do not suffer on the whole from landlessness. Most Haitian families in most parts of Haiti have access to some land. The holdings are privatized. Families own land. There's no community land per se like you find in Central America. Haiti is very familially organized. And it's families that own the land. Sometimes the families will not divide up the land if it's not good for agriculture. They'll keep the land together to graze livestock collectively there rather than to spread it. But good agricultural land is split up by family members through an informal inheritance procedure. The holdings are very scattered. That means the average Haitian farmer doesn't have all of his land on one plot. He'll have it spread out into 3, 4, or 5 plots. Furthermore, the amount of land is not great, The average holding is going to depend on the part of Haiti, but the average holding in Haiti is probably between 1.5, if you put everything together, all the plots together, is 1.5 hectares or 2 hectares, which is very, very small, but it's spread out. In other words, there's no call for land reform in Haiti in the sense of land redistribution. You'd simply be redistributing land among the same people that have it now. Haitians acquire land through inheritance. They also acquire it temporarily through sharecropping, which is found widely throughout Haiti, in which it's actually, I found in my village that farmers who are themselves are farmers would let other farmers sharecrop part of their land, and they may themselves sharecrop land for another. It's a very complex system of land sharing, of land mobility. And land purchase is very important in Haiti. At least it was when I did my initial research in the 1970s. People were trying to acquire land through purchase so they could pass it on to their children. Now with the impulse of emigration, the whole issue of acquiring land, now a much more important issue is how to get money to get your children out of Haiti. Peasant cropping. Technology, usually they don't use plows or tractors, it's with a hoe. Most of it is dependent on rainfall. Most peasant farming is in the mountains, and of course there could be upland irrigation, but there is none for the most part. And I'm going to talk about that as an option. Land clearing in the mountains has led to deforestation and erosion, and there is not enough land to let the land rest for several seasons between. So the land gets worked and worked continuously. It may be let rest for a year or two. But a lot of the land has been so worked that it is no longer good for agriculture. It has been converted to pasture. So even if you leave it alone, trees will not grow back there spontaneously on much land because it has been converted to savanna. The grass and trees are somewhat enemies of each other. And so a lot of landscape in Haiti is denuded, and a lot of it is turned into savanna, pasture for animals. The development agencies often do not recognize the importance of livestock to Haitian farmers because now there is such a large chance of crop failure because there's less rainfall than in past. I've heard this over and over again all over Haiti, and I believe it. The rainfall has dwindled, so now Haitians in many regions stand a 50% chance of losing a crop because of drought conditions. It's very, very serious, which means that farming is not a secure venture. Livestock will survive. So the farmers in the places where I've been count much more or equally heavily on their livestock as they do on their crops because livestock can survive drought. A very important, and for development projects, this is going to be very important. Haitians are not and have never been, as far as I can see, but let me say certainly they're not now, what we would call subsistence farmers, like the indigenous cultivators of the Amazon, who basically grow all their food. They grow everything they eat, and they eat everything they grow. Haitians have been, even before the revolution, there were slave markets. Haitians had access to their own provision plots, and they sold much of what they produced in those plots in markets. They were permitted to keep the proceeds from these sales. Well, Haitians are inveterate cash croppers. That most Haitians, it's going to differ from crop to crop, but most Haitians plant most of their crops to sell in the market and to buy back. They will buy food during the year. So it's a cash economy. They're heavily involved. This means that development schemes that want to assist the Haitians to become self-sufficient in food, let's say, so they grow all the food to feed their family, it's out of touch with the aspirations of the Haitian farmers. The Haitian farmers want assistance in growing crops that they can sell in the market. In other words, they're involved in selling and purchasing. They're very different in that sense from the subsistence economies of indigenous America, and they're very similar. This commercial orientation is found throughout the Caribbean. Some quick pictures. I mean, those of you in Haiti. This is in lowland Haiti. This is not mountain agriculture. And this is the standard group. You have a group of laborers that would get together. Now, I don't know in this group whether there are several forms of recruiting labor. Farmers do not, on the whole, farm their land by themselves. They recruit other people to help them. They can recruit them through exchange labor. There are different exchange labor arrangements. Demain pour moi, jeudi pour moi, demain pour vous. Today you work on my land, tomorrow I'll work on your land. But now it's more and more common to purchase labor. and farmers will purchase labor from each other. It's a very cash-oriented economy. Here's another scene in what is a rice field, but farmers now in the Artibonite are afraid because of cholera. There's been some fear to actually even work in the rice fields now to avoid water, but they're starting to, by the way, the cholera epidemic, apparently fewer cases are being reported now. It's a lull. It may just be a temporary lull until the next rainy season comes, but I'm not saying it's going away, but the number of reported cases have fallen. By the way, today is an important day in Haiti. Haiti technically has no president, as far as I know. The president's term of office expired today. I think he was voted several months ago to have 3 additional months, but I'm not sure everyone in Haiti agrees with that. So at any rate, it's going to be interesting to watch. This is a big day in Haiti now. This is the Agrarian Architecture, I call it. This is the whole, the Haitians in the area where I work. This is lowland agriculture. They don't have plows. It's not straight lines. What they do is they build these elaborate, they call them beat, mounds, that the water can come in and the crops are planted on top. And they can maximize. I believe they get more planting space using these devices than they do if they just had straight furrows. I don't know haven't figured out the mathematics of that. Here is such a field that's planted in crops. Okay, agrarian options and dilemmas. Okay. I have found now, we studied a village in '72, we go back there now, and I've talked about this all over Haiti. Agriculture seems to be a declining option in 2 senses. It's less viable economically because the land is less fertile, but also I have found, and I don't want to generalize to all of Haiti, I have found in much of Haiti that people are discouraged completely with agriculture. There are communities where nobody wants their child to go into farming. They don't want their sons to be farmers. They would rather their sons get an education and leave. Farming is, it's become a less. There are areas up in Filet des Pins where there's more rainfall, where people are still more enthusiastic about farming. But farming, the hillside farming that goes on in Haiti, in terms of the future of Haiti, its potential for the future of Haiti, has been described by experts who've looked at this as marginal. It's really not the wave of the future. They're there, so something must be done now. But it's declining subjectively, and people are trying to get out. People are trying to get their children out. This is not true of female marketing. I found the women are still very enthusiastic about their daughters becoming market women and going into that. So there may be a difference. But farming is there. Okay, the major problem with farming, however, development has to address farming. Whether I think it's disappearing or not, or whether it's the future or not, it has to address farming. The major problem, and this surprised me when I first heard it, we think of Haitians as landless. The major problem that people repeat over and over again, we've got land, we don't have water. We don't have money to work the land. You have to have money to buy seed. You have to have money now to purchase labor. You cannot work the land without money. It's cash shortage and water shortage, which are the major barriers to agriculture in Haiti, and development has to address these issues. I sometimes hear a cry for land reform in Haiti. I'm sorry, the Haitian peasant has his own land tenure system. That is not the major dilemma. Land shortage or inequitable land distribution. It's capital shortage and water shortage. This is what I found. Because of drought, then what do? Agricultural credit could be a source of capital for the land. For water, I have seen systems in the Dominican Republic that you can actually capture water upland if there are upland water sources, and using gravity-driven drip irrigation. There are hydraulic potentials both in the Haitian lowlands and the Haitian highlands. This should be and I'm talking now about agricultural water, irrigation water, and to talk about potable water, drinking water is something else which is equally important. But I would place water at the top. And I would place agricultural credit but the problem with agricultural credit is farmers have said to me they're reluctant to borrow money because because of drought, their crops may die. So they are asking for subsidized access to seeds, free seeds. And this raises a whole other slew of problems. But at any rate, there are agricultural, but there is no sensible discussing of helping agriculture unless we deal with the water problem and with the problem of access to the capital needed to work it. The Haitian market women. The women in Haiti are inveterate market. They're oriented toward the market. This does not mean that they sell the crops that their family farm produces only. They do that. But it means they raise capital and they go out and buy and resell. Where I've done research, the women distinguish, and they still distinguish between two levels of female commerce. Madame Sarah, that's a woman, Madame Sarah, it's the name of a bird that flies from place to place and eats crops. Well, the Madame Sarah travels from place to place and purchases crops. She has to have a lot of money. To be a Madame Sarah, you have to have in American dollars at least $200 or $250 to be a Madame Sarah. And people tell me, you know, if you only have $200, you know, you're a small Sarah. Une question là, tout le monde qui comprend ça m'a parlé là, levez main s'il vous plaît. Nous avons un Haitien là. Okay, very good. I see we have a lot of Haitians here. Very good. I can slip into Creole then. I feel funny talking about these things in English. Males do engage in marketing. And when I was proposing in my village a credit program for the women, you know, some men came up to me afterwards and said, Gerald, papier-nous. You know, nous qu'on fait commerce tout, nous fait commerce bête. Okay, the men deal largely with livestock, with commerce of livestock. But really, most of the marketing is done by Haitian women. You know, there's anger in the village after the earthquake because none of the relief was reaching the village. Now, the village I'm talking about is about 20 miles from Port-au-Prince. It's northeast. The earthquake hit west. So this village was hit by the earthquake, but lightly so. The houses were cracked, none were tumbled, but they were in dire, desperate need because there had been more people there. They had no access to any of the relief. By the way, people were terrified. They would not sleep in their houses. And this is true, particularly people, for months, people would not go into the house. They were afraid of aftershocks. There are children still that refuse to go to a school if it's a concrete school. They were terrified and traumatized by this earthquake. I'm telling you, children, it's entered children's game now. Children try to scare each other. They're going, woo, 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 woo. They make the sound of the earthquake. They're woo, 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 woo. Or I've seen little girls playing with each other, helping each other. One would limp and the other would carry her. You know, it's like they're playing games of what happened after the earthquake, people that were wounded. The earthquake was truly traumatic, but it was economically catastrophic as well. They were furious at not getting any of the food that was supposedly being passed out in Port-au-Prince. And by the way, many people went back to Port-au-Prince to get access to the food. And in fact, one of my students, Andrew, you've written a report, you've done an analysis. There's a report done on cell phone. And actually, people, after the earthquake, people who had never been to Port-au-Prince were going to Port-au-Prince in order to get access to the much-valued relief. At any rate, the people in the village were furious about. So I asked the women, I was interviewing a group of women about this, and they said, okay, bon, la disons comme ça. So I asked them to make a choice between credit or free food. They want credit for commerce, or would they like, you know, trucks of free food? You know, if I had so much money, should I give it in free food? Ça nous plutôt manger, ou bien nous plutôt crédit pour faire commerce? Do you prefer commerce, or do you prefer the free food? And the woman answered, eh ben, écoutez, blanc. Listen, foreigner, tous les deux bons. Both of them are good. We like both of those. I said, no, you have to choose. Faut nous choisir. Na jouen quitte manger, quitte crédit. And the unanimous answer was they preferred credit. They're not going to refuse handouts, but they would prefer credit so they could go back to doing the things they used to do 20 years ago, the activity in the marketplace. It's entered even Haitian art. Markets, this is children carrying produce to market. Here's a market scene in art. I got this from my house. You find many market scenes in Haitian art. Here's the real thing, okay? It's crowded, it looks chaotic for the outside. You go into the marketplace, it's not chaotic, it's well organized. There are rules of the game that people follow. It's a very well organized system. Okay, let me talk about family strategies. And very quickly about this, about children, and about producing and raising children. There are two forms of marriage. There are two forms of conjugal union in Haiti, marriage and what's called plaçage. Plaçage means two people live together as man and wife. They're called Monsieur et Madame. But legal marriage has a higher status in the village, and people aspire to that eventually. There is some polygamy in the rural areas. A man can have two wives. Not legally, but you can have two placé wives or one legal wife and others. These patterns have disappeared, I think, in the diaspora. I don't know if Haitians, are there Haitians in Miami or Gainesville that have two wives? I don't think that goes on here. Okay, but in the rural areas, of Haiti, it is still socially acceptable to have more than one wife. Children now are supported, children are valued. Okay, it used to be children were valued because of agricultural field labor, but I've done surveys on this. Haitians value children now in the rural areas, and I'm talking about rural Haitians. Now, they value children for support in old age. La fait pour moi, l'aime pas capable de faire encore, la fait pour moi. Ya fait pour moi. They'll take care of me in old age when I can no longer support myself. How many children? It's sometimes said Haitians want to have a lot of children. This is really not the case. It was very difficult. I would ask Haitians, "Qui quantité petit tu t'aimes gagner?" How many children would you like to have? And the answer was, "Eh ben, ça bon Dieu ben m'apprend." Whatever God gives me, I'll take. Okay, there's a rule in Haiti that I eventually understood. You don't fool around with God. Haitians believe in the Supreme Being, all Haitians. Bon Dieu, whether you're Catholic, Protestant, or practice Vodou, everyone believes in Bon Dieu. Bon Dieu, you don't fool around with him. Si vous mandez 2 petites, là-bas 10. Si vous mandez 8 petites, là-bas une seule. If you ask him for 2 children, he'll give you 10. You ask him for 8 children, he'll give you 1. So people are not going to answer the stupid questions of a Blanc, exposing themselves to divine retribution. So they seem to be completely apathetic of it. It's not. I tried asking, well, if God asked you how many children you wanted, what would you say? I'd say, I'd say whatever, give it. Okay, try this. There are 2 men just like you, or 2 women just like you. One has 8 children, one has 4 children. Which is better off? Almost unanimously 4 children. Okay, 2 women just like you. One has 5 children, one has 2 children. Which is better off? 5 children. Okay, the rule is yongé pagé. One eye is not an eye. You need children to protect you in old age. There's high child mortality. I'll give you figures on that. Okay, so they want about between 4 and 5 children. Child relocation. Education is so important now that if you cannot send your child to school and you have someone that you can place the child with and the child will go to school, you may let the child live there. There is a common pattern of child relocation throughout rural Haiti. And it used to be that only the bourgeoisie would take in children, the more wealthy Haitians. But now, because of urbanization, even poor urban families need extra labor. They need, particularly children, daughters, to stand and get water, for example, to stand in the long lines and get water. So they may take in children. The deal is you're supposed to send them to school. And you're supposed to feed them and clothe them. But oftentimes that is not done. I've talked to Haitians here in Gainesville about that. Many students have personal experiences of children living with them who are not their siblings, and they say it's not a bad arrangement. There are cases in Haiti that have been documented where it is a bad arrangement. So Haitians are torn on this particular issue, on the Restavec issue. In terms of population density, very quickly here, go down the right column. Well, Cuba, I wanted to compare Cuba, Florida, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Martinique, Puerto Rico, and Barbados, just for the heck of it. People per square mile, okay? Some people think that Haiti has too many children to support. The problem of Haiti is they have been excessively fertile. Well, just look at the statistics here. If low population density were a source of wealth, well, Cuba should be the wealthiest country. It has the lowest population density. Florida has 313 people per square mile. Dominican Republic 513, Haiti 843. But then you have Martinique, which has 957, and Puerto Rico, which have denser populations, and they're much wealthier. And you say, well, it's not fair. Martinique's part of France, Puerto Rico's part of the U.S., it doesn't count. Well, look at Barbados, which is an independent country. It has the densest of all, and it's quite wealthy, relatively speaking, okay? The point I'm trying to make here is that excessive population is not the cause of Haiti's poverty. What causes poverty is the economic system. The carrying capacity of land is dependent on the prevailing economic system, countries can support much denser, with the proper economy, can support denser populations than Haiti. Haiti's got the problem the land is eroded, and most of the land is not arable, but I just want to dispel the myth that somehow Haiti's root problem is excessive fertility. This is just not the case. Schooling of children, universal goal. There's a 53% literacy rate in Haiti. That's measured by people over the age of 15 that have been to school. People don't go around and measure actual literacy, but it's the number of people that have been to school over the age of 15. Latin America has a 90% average. There are 15,200 primary schools in Haiti, but here's the problem, 90% of them are private. Two-thirds of Haitian children attend at least a year of school. Now, Aristide is a very controversial figure in Haiti at the moment. There are some people that like him, some people that don't like him. But one of the things you have to say about Aristide is he was sincerely interested in education. And he did a lot in his brief rule to build more schools. And he wants to go back to Haiti. And he says what he wants to do is get involved in education. He doesn't want to be president again. This is what he says, But he's now asked for a passport. So he's in the process, I think, of asking for a passport to go back to Haiti, since one of his predecessors, Jean-Claude Duvalier, went back. But anyway, the major educational problem that I found there are many problems. The language of education. It should be in the language of the people of Creole. It actually is for the first 4 years now by law. The first 4 years are supposed to be in Creole, and you're supposed to transition into French. There are urban schools where the parents insist on speaking French all the time. They don't want this 4 years of Creole. So the language of education is an issue. Teacher training is an issue. But the major issue that I found in the rural areas is the schools, 15,200 schools, they're not financially viable. The parents do not have money to continue paying the tuition. This was particularly true after the earthquake. Therefore, these are private schools these have no support, the vast majority of them. There are people that open schools and they depend entirely on parental tuition to pay the teachers, whose salaries are very low. So these schools are not economically viable. There are tensions. If the teachers don't get paid, if the parents can't pay the tuition, the teachers can't get paid. The teachers are angry at the school director. It's a bad situation. So before we even talk about pedagogical improvements in the Haitian school system, before we even talk about that, we have to recognize that most of the schools are financially independent private schools. Now, Haitians in the city, in Port-au-Prince, some friends of mine are furious at how expensive the private schools are. You pay an expensive monthly tuition, and you have to pay matriculation. You have to pay something up front. It's very expensive. Well, in the rural areas where Maria and I were, we started our own little mini school project. The annual tuition is the equivalent of $38 US, the annual tuition. But parents with 3 or 4 kids still can't pay that much. And the school does not demand matriculation up front in the places that I've been. So the behavior of the private schools in Port-au-Prince is very different from the schools that are spread out in the towns and certainly in the rural areas. That is the core issue. Now, the developmental issue is going to be, wait a second. Do you invest your money in trying to get a public school system that covers not 10% but 90%? Do you do that? Or do you accept the reality as well? You try that, of course, but do you also accept the reality of these private schools and find some way to support them? And the private schools, most of them are probably associated with one or another church. Catholic schools, Protestant schools, but I've seen there are also secular schools as well. Do you find ways to support them, or do you exclude them, or do you focus only on the public education system? Okay. If we focus on the public education system, there could be 3 generations of students who don't get educated. So I would propose looking at the private schools as well. Healthcare strategies. I'm going to move ahead quickly and talk about immigration. It was a minor option when we did research in the 70s. Now, I would ask the question, bon, si nous t'as joué un visa, if you could get a visa. Si tout le monde ici t'a joué un visa, combien t'as parti? How many would leave? How many would go to the States? And the answer I generally get is tout le monde t'a parti. Everyone would leave. Immigration has been, and that's an exaggeration, but nonetheless, immigration has become one of the major national aspirations in Haiti. Now, when I say that, Haitians are not abandoning Haiti because they emigrate. They're under obligation to send money back to their family. Sometimes the family has financed the emigration. They may have sold land to finance the emigration, and the person will send money back. So Haitians continue to be connected to their family. They're not turning their back on Haiti or on their families. Furthermore, I have very dramatic evidence of this in the village where we are. Haitians are building houses, sending money to build houses so they can come back. They want eventually to come back to Haiti and live. But for the moment, to survive in Haiti, you almost have to spend part of your life out of Haiti to build up an economic base that hopefully you could go back to Haiti someday. So immigration has become a major issue in Haiti. So when we do projects among farmers, we should do it in full awareness that we're dealing with a population that would, on the whole, like to get their children out of Haiti, at least for part of their lives. It's become almost a necessary strategy. Where do you go? The easiest place to go is the Dominican Republic. You just cross the border. You hire a boucon, or passeur. It's a smuggler, someone who knows the ways. You pay him so much, he'll bring you into the Dominican Republic, drop you off somewhere, then you're on your own. Preferred options are the U.S. and Canada. Haitians are also going to other Caribbean islands as well. But to me, it was very interesting to see that when we did research in the 1970s, the better off families in the village were those who had more land. Now, the better off families are those who have children in the U.S. So the whole economic game plan has shifted. It hasn't radically changed, but certainly it has shifted, and now immigration has become so important. Now, development. These are the realities of life in a village. Development has to plug into this. Do institutions plug into this? Here we have a number of sacred cows. Things that people want to... There are different opinions about this. In Haiti, I have interviewed hundreds of Haitians on this topic. And I said, okay, look, if development money comes in, who should manage the money in country? Est-ce que nous mettons by l'État cobla? Can we give the money to the government? Unanimously, people said to me, l'État a mangé tout cobla. Nous pas jouer rien là-dedans. The government will eat everything. Please do not give the government the money. I've heard this unanimously. For reasons, historical reasons that I'm not going to get into, and Professor Gegas said this last time, and I repeat it, and I've heard it said by Haitians. Haitians do not expect anything from l'État. They would like to see a good government, but they don't, in the villages, they don't count. We saw a movie the other night done by two University of Florida students, and the women were talking in Creole. One of the first questions, one of the persons said is the government helping you out here? And the guy answered him, l'État? Nous pas gagner l'État ici. What do we l'État? We don't have a government here. Where do you see the government? Okay, so the Haitian government, if you contrast the Haitian government if you contrast the Haitian government, the reaction of Haitians to their government, and I've done this among Dominicans on the other side of the border, the Dominican Republic. There was Trujillo in the Dominican Republic, there was Duvalier. Okay, I hear you. I better move forward. There was, and my wife is Dominican, we argue about this. I say Trujillo actually developed the Dominican Republic. He created a lot of infrastructure. He did things, he helped modernize the country. And she says, yeah, he did it for himself, though. It's true, but Duvalier did nothing for Haiti. Dominicans expect their government. Okay, there's corruption in the government in the Dominican Republic. The Dominicans, el funcionario coge. El funcionario lo que hace es coger dinero. Government officials, they steal money. There's corruption in the Dominican Republic, but they demand things of their government. The Haitians in the village, when we were doing research in the 1970s, it was under Jean-Claude, the only thing the Haitians wanted from the government was to be left alone. I was in a village after the earthquake. The UN finally came, gave out 500 vouchers to the village. But they wanted to go through proper authorities. They went to the local mayor. So they came in with their crews. It was an advance team. They were passing out the vouchers, and then they'd come with the food and the clothing and the other things were going to be given out. So they filmed it. They gave the magistrat 500 vouchers so he would pass it out to the villagers. This is the magistrat of the nearby town. The village was about a 20-minute walk away. They took the pictures, and everyone did. The team went away, and the magistrat passed out 40 vouchers. He kept 460 for himself. Let me do the math. That's about a 92% overhead rate. And the villagers were furious. Now they're not afraid to speak up. But this type of behavior on the part of the government, it continues. Haitian and Cuban physicians. There was a Haitian physician in the health center. He was the director of the health center. He was supposed to be there every day. He showed up 2 days a week. The Cubans had set up about 4 miles away a post-earthquake center. And the guy was furious because they had done it without his permission. They had gotten the permission of the central government, but he was absolutely... So I went out with him to serve as interpreter. He didn't speak Spanish, and he, of course, didn't speak Creole. And he wanted to tell them they had to leave. Because they had not gone through proper authority. So this physician was doing the best he could surviving. He went 2 days a week because he had a private clinic elsewhere that he had to take care of. And he didn't have that many resources. There was no, the electric generator was broken. I mean, he was up against but he was, he wanted to get rid of the Cuban team who were providing valuable medical care. And I went there during the interview. He backed down. He didn't try to kick him out eventually. He just complained about this or that, and it eventually worked. My wife and I were going in. We were bringing in school supplies to our village. We had just crossed the Haitian border, which, I was shaken down for money at the Haitian border by one of the policemen who was signing the passports. He invented a sum that I was supposed to pay. And we were stopped on the road, and we had about 4 or 5 boxes of school supplies. Well, one of the policemen stopped us, wanted to see our documents and everything, and, he was eyeing the school supplies. Well, there was a UN soldier standing next to him, however, a young guy from Peru. So he insisted that I give him at least a bottle of glue. In other words, it was so built into the system that it would have, he would have somehow been violating some cultural or national law to not take something. Okay. I have very negative expectations of the Haitian government, but the foreign aid establishment can be just as bad. I was going to give a history of that, but there's no time for that. Let me just state, if you look at the budgets of development agencies, and I'm not going to generalize to every NGO or to every government program, but if you look at the budgets, to call them top-heavy would be an exaggeration. The ordinary way the USAID functions is they work through contractors. They contract with one or another NGO. It can be a non-profit or a for-profit NGO. They are the usual implementers of the project. The money, they submit a budget, it's approved by USAID, they get a certain percent of overhead, they have to buy products from the U.S., vehicles from the U.S., only American firms can compete. Okay, not only is a tiny percentage of the budget allocated for things that actually get out to people in many projects, the money that is spent makes its way back to the United States. Okay, I'm not angry about this, I'm not being cranky, I'm just pointing out something that is a reality. The NGOs themselves have become, some of them have become very wealthy. There are bona fide NGOs, small church groups that are doing things. But but there are others that are raising money and very little of it. Some reaches to people. But when you're spending 80 cents to move 20 cents out, there's something wrong. The budget should be structured in such a way that you're spending 15 cents to move 85 cents. There are costs to doing development. You can't expect 100 cents of every dollar to get there. But the NGOs themselves have become extremely, I would say, rapacious and competitive in their competition for funds. There are privately funded NGOs that are doing things, volunteer self-financed trips to Haiti, small church groups. Americans have texted in donations to NGOs that hopefully will use them well. In addition to budgetary predation, I found other types of gatekeepers that prevent resources from reaching. I'm calling these philosophical gatekeepers. These are like sacred cows. Okay, for example, some projects insist on reforestation. Well, reforestation, it's kind of late in Haiti. You're not going to get forests back. The forests are gone, people are everywhere. You do agroforestry. You mix trees with crops, agroforestry. But you still hear the theme of reforestation. Misplaced pedagogical approaches. I have seen projects that say, well, we're not going out with any resources. We're going to teach people. We're going to teach people how to organize. We're going to teach them how to raise funds. We'll teach them techniques, we'll teach them bookkeeping techniques, but they're not going to get any money, they have to get the money themselves. This is a pedagogical approach. The notion is you teach a man how to fish rather than give him fish. Well, wait a second, there's something, you teach people how to fish, but if they don't have boats and nets, they can't fish. But if you're going to be a teacher of fishing, you better make sure you're dealing with a population that has the material resources that is required to fish. All right, misplaced pedagogy is one. Another thing is watershed management. Farmers will plant trees not to restore landscapes. They will plant trees largely in order to make money from the trees, either fruit trees or wood trees. And I was involved in that, and there's not going to be any time to talk about that. But watershed management is dominating a lot of, watersheds, you cannot protect entire watersheds. It's a protectionist approach. I have advocated an income-generating tree planting approach using the tree as an income-generating crop. It's controversial, but ecological justice. I was talking to a Scandinavian group, they asked me to do some work for them, and I went over there and gave a talk, and then one of their projects did not work. They were going to try something else. I said, what are you going to do now in Haiti? Well, we're going to try ecological justice. I said, what's that? They said, well, we're going to have a conference to figure it out. This is a church group in a Scandinavian country. I don't want to... Okay, it's a church group that's getting charitable donations, but there's a gatekeeper there, or there are gatekeepers with their own philosophies that are determining how that money is being used, and they're not doing it maliciously. They assume that their philosophy is right. Finally, the one that I get most angry at is one that I was personally affected by. We had a tree planting project going. The basic, it was agroforestry. There was a division of labor. Land, labor, capital. The farmers provided the land, they planted the trees, they got free seedlings to plant on their land that they would be able to harvest and turn into boards or poles or charcoal, whatever. They gave the land, it was their land. Their labor, we didn't pay food for work or anything. And we provided the capital in the form of tree seedlings. Each farmer got about $20 worth of tree seedlings. So it was a subsidy of $20 worth of fast-growing tree seedlings. The project worked beautifully for about 20 years. My friend Mike Banner's colleagues, he's here. He was with the project almost for 20 years. I was just with the first two. Nurseries have been set up all over the country. the project would buy from the nurseries. The nurseries could make a little profit. It was a for-profit thing. And then we would distribute the seedlings free of charge to the farmers. Farmers cannot pay for the seedlings. It's not going to be good. Well, along comes a USAID director. He was against subsidies. He didn't like subsidies. The farmers from henceforth had to pay for their seedlings. They can't pay for their seedlings. American farmers don't pay for their seedlings. If you want American farmers to plant trees, you subsidize them. I'm not talking about Weyerhaeuser or Georgia Pacific. That's different. I'm talking about farmers. They don't, even in the States. You want to see, you subsidize trees. No, the Haitians have to tree. Now, if the Haitians had asked for free condoms, they could get free condoms. Now, explain the logic of that to me. I mean, it's like I said this, and he said, look, Aid, I have been to 100 voodoo ceremonies. In no voodoo ceremony have I seen anything as bizarre as what goes on every day in your USAID office. I had some fights with USAID. Okay. But again, here is the case of a gatekeeper with his philosophy. Not only he blocked a project, he destroyed a project. You get a jerk in a position of power, and they can do immense harm. Now, I am not lambasting AID because it was AID that financed the project in the first place. I'm not trying to lambaste or, demonize all of these institutions because they can do good. But the problem is, a lot of times, they don't do good. They do very well for themselves, but they don't do good. Let's put it that way. All right. There have been several, I think, successful ways of beating it. And I'll just list them. The Agroforestry Project, we got around some of the gatekeepers, but we never got around, we never made ourselves independent from government support. That was a bad mistake. You continue independence there. We never found a foundation that would finance this. If there were a foundation that were interested in trees in Haiti, I guarantee Haiti could be filled with trees, planted by farmers on their own land for their own personal profit. I have no doubt about that. I'm not exaggerating in the least. It could be done if there were a foundation. But if you depend on the shifting government policies, that was a bad weakness in the project, okay? Female credit is being done very well by Funkoze. It's based on the Grameen project in India, but it's an organization that facilitates credit to women. It's doing it very effectively, I'm told. Healthcare delivery. The next talk we're going to hear is a group called Zamila Santé, Partners in Health. I've read their literature. I've only read their literature, but it seems to be working very well. I won't go into that. I'll let the person who's going to give the talk about that. They have a philosophy of collaborating with the government, and I want to hear about that. I'm sure they're not giving their money to the government. They have 5,000 employees now, health workers. They have gotten away from the silly notion of volunteer health workers or volunteer tree promoters. You pay people in these projects. They have about 4,000 of these now. I'm sure they don't give the money to the government to pay the people. But they're somehow working with the government. I'll be very interested to hear how that is working. World Bank had a great project. Now, World Bank had to go through the government. It gave out 15, but it contracted with an NGO to make available $15,000 grants to community. The communities themselves decided what they use it for. Fixing the road, upgrading the water system. They could do what they want with it. Now, again, it was done by an NGO, but with the government's permission. Okay, if I had $1 billion to spend, and I'll end on this, actually, what would I do? There are ways of getting things done in Haiti. And some of them have been proven, some of them probably haven't yet been tried. If I had $1 billion, the U.S. has given $1 billion. If I had $1 billion, I don't, by the way. But if I had, I would divide it into 10 regional funds, autonomous regional funds. Each region in Haiti would get $100 million. I would not do it by population because one of the problems is a third of the population is in Port-au-Prince. You give a third of the money, the Port-au-Prince is going to grow. You want a system that will create jobs outside of Port-au-Prince and other parts. I would 10 autonomous regional development funds of $100 million each. One and only one fund would go to Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince has got a lot of problems. Each regional fund would be subdivided into different sectors. There'd be some of it would be made available to local mayors. You work with the government, some of it, for things that the mayors are supposed to do. They're supposed to pick up garbage. I had a nice conversation with Tim Townsend. He's the UF garbage man working in Haiti. They would, they fix local roads. They plant trees on the side of the roads. They do drainage systems. Maybe do potable water. You do something with the mayors. But the bulk of the money would be for work with town groups and farm groups directly, not getting the mayor's permission or having him choose the projects. I ask people, okay, they say, I'm going to give the government of Port-au-Prince. Okay, mabay kobla no kapag kite kob na may magistrat. We can leave the money in the hands of the mayors. And they said, Pimo ve toujours. That's even a worse option. There's a great mistrust of government in Haiti, but you could work with governments for limited things, but you save the bulk of the money for other works. The major thing would be, the major thing would be job creation in the short run. But there would be health earmarked, there would be educational, support for education, and you would divide it into different sectors, but there would be 10 autonomous regional funds, and they would disperse, and groups would be contracted with to carry out the projects, but no one, because you need someone to carry out the projects and manage them locally, to link up to the farmer groups. But no one who charged more than 15% administrative costs, their proposal should be thrown in the waste bin. It would be possible in dividing it. UF is making contributions, I'll go through them, is already making contributions to Haiti. We have the best library collection on Haiti probably in the country. We have the largest Creole language program in the country now, thanks to my colleague, Ben Hebelwaith, who has really built up the Haitian Creole program. The College of Public Health and Health Professions has a project in Grecier and I think Léogane. They're setting up respiratory disease facilities, and there's also a component that deals with fish, with protein issues, with nutrition issues, fish and poultry. IFAS has a project. It's called WINNER. That's a USAID. They invent all these things, WINNER. I forget what it stands for. Watershed Initiative of National Natural Everlasting Resources, something. I mean, environmental resources. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, yeah. And they're doing things. They're doing many things in different parts of the country, including, to my great surprise, I said, including dealing with the garbage problem in Port-au-Prince. And I know we have Florence Sergil is working in winter. She takes people from UF down there constantly to Haiti. Individual faculty work as consultants. There's a Haiti working group on campus. There was an earlier one by Alan Thames. Now there's a new one by Kathleen Culverson. Kathleen, where are you? Trying to bring the faculty together and get us to work together. Very important. That's mission impossible. This is really, every faculty, we're all off building our own mud pies to try to get us to cooperate. But at any rate, the Club Creole is one of the most active student groups on campus. I was the advisor for many years before I retired, and I'm just amazed at the number of things they did. And there's also Gators for Haiti that's trying to raise about $100,000, $50,000, I think, to send to Haiti. And UF medical students used to go to Haiti in the past. They can't go to Haiti now. They haven't been able to go to Haiti for several years, so they deal with Haitians in the Dominican Republic. Potential contributions of UF. I don't want to tell the dean what to do, but okay. UF could become the center of Haitian scholarship in the country. I mean, no other center, there is none yet that I'm aware of that is seen as the center of it. UF could be the center of scholarship on Haiti. There could be energetic Haiti-related grant. By the way, UF, I'm told, is under economic stress at the moment, so UF doesn't have a lot of money to build new programs, okay? So it could take the form of faculty, soliciting grants to do work in Haiti. Search for a Haiti-related endowment of some type. The anthropology department is in the process of hiring a specialist in southeastern USA native languages. Okay, that is not a high priority topic in terms of, But someone gave an endowment for that. So it's a legitimate, it's a legitimate intellectual thing. Well, we should find some padrino that would give us an endowment of $1 billion, to work on Haiti. Then UF would go into action, I'm quite confident, with an endowment of that size. But there has to be some scholarships for Haitian students. I understand the Winter Project does have has allocated scholarships for a small number. Huh?
8 students.
For 8 students, okay. Special support for Haiti-related theses and dissertations, a Haitian publication series, targeted faculty hires. That's delicate. If you have an endowment, you can say you're going to hire for Haiti. Increased course offerings. All right. Let me skip to the final, and I promise to end here. The role of the diaspora. Haitians in the diaspora. Haitians in the diaspora, first of all, they are already helping. By the way, there's a difference between helping Haiti and helping Haitians. Let's make that distinction. Few people are in a position to help Haiti deal with its structural problems, etc., etc. Few people can do that. Bill Clinton might be able to do it now if he controls, several $billion. You can help Haiti. But most of us, all we can do, honestly, is assist Haitians. Chosen select group of Haitians. The Haitians in the diaspora, the first obligation is to send money back to your relatives to help them. And also to help them to get to the U.S. And when they come to the U.S., you give them temporary lodging. You help them find a job until they can get independent. So the first duty is to help individual kin groups. But you could go further. For example, like what my wife and I have done in a village in Tomazo. I was furious. A report I had written for an organization never got acted on. I said, let's act on it ourselves. We just, with our own money, we set up the scholarship fund. What we did is we chose one school. I told you about the dilemma of the school. They don't have money. They're not paying the teachers. The teachers are angry. So what we did is we targeted one of the better schools in the region, L'École Mère. It was the local Catholic school. They have a very good reputation, and this was run by Haitian nuns. So I knew the money was not going to get ripped off. We agreed that they're going to give scholarships. We will pay scholarships for 80 children from our village. So now 80 children are now. And the deal is the parents supply the uniforms. And it costs $38 or $40 per child. I mean, it's no big deal. It's doable. Okay. The school is helped because it now has a guaranteed income flow from at least a small, enough students to make the school financially viable. If you spread it out over 20 schools, okay, it'll help the students that are studying, but it's not going to help the school. So you target a school. We targeted one community, the place where we live. That's nepotism. We help the people we knew. That's the way the world works. We targeted that thing. We said 80, and now 80 kids are going to school. From the diaspora, you could do that. I asked the people, in the village, est-ce que moun là qui Miami, est-ce que yo kon voye ko pour ça tout? They say no. But people in the diaspora, you could have a program like that. You have an advantage over Americans. You speak the language. You know the country. You have connections. You can go walk into a place. You have instant connections. The diaspora could do amazing things. And they wouldn't have to go through any gatekeeping organization. So, of course, the best thing the diaspora could do is become professional and go back and work in Haiti. I talked to a young Haitian who's getting a PhD in education. I don't know if she's here tonight. We talked the other day. Oh, okay, merci. And she wants to go back and work in Haiti. At any rate, I conclude by hoping, much can be done in Haiti. And if I have been negative about some things, it's not unreasonably negative. These are problems that I have personally seen and run up against. But many things can be done if we will simply recognize the dangers, the facility with which funds can be misused, and aggressively seek for creative ways to break around the gatekeepers and to get money out. I would love to see a Haiti where the children are all in school, the streets are clean, there are health clinics all over the place. It is possible to do it. I would break the $1 billion down into 10 autonomous funds, not center it all through Port-au-Prince, but I have great hopes that Haiti can change. It has been a privilege to work among Haitians. When you cross from the Dominican Republic into Haiti, I'm not only switching from Spanish to Creole, I'm switching into a new mode of being. There is an energy in Haiti, a sense of humor, a willingness to work, that and an ability to survive. I'd have been dead long ago, in the village. An ability to survive that is absolutely, it's inspirational, and I don't like to romanticize or play a violin. I'm being quite sincere in this. There is something special about Haiti, and I would like to see Haiti quickly transform itself from being seen as the basket case of the hemisphere to being seen as a miracle of development that makes even the Asian, the Asian, what do we call it?
Tigers.
The Asian tigers, din by comparison. Blessings on Haiti, and may the country begin to pick up. Thank you for your patience.